in high school band, we used to do this exercise where we would all play a major chord, and whoever was on the third would drop by a half step first, and then the person who was on the fifth would drop by a half step, so it becomes a minor chord, then a diminished chord, and then the root would drop, and so it like finds a major chord again. I always loved that exercise, and so this piece, basically the drift that happens in the music is that, but with the sharp 9 chord.
Well, you have this new job, right?
Yep.
I don't know if it's public, right?
It's public now.
From what I understand, yeah. You got this new job at University of Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And what was like the process of applying to that and getting the gig? And I guess, are you going to relocate now from Philadelphia?
Yeah, so it's a 1-year visiting position. Okay. So because of that, my family lives in Philly. My parents and my wife's parents live around Philly, so I don't really want to uproot the whole family for a 1-year thing. So I'm traveling back and forth every week. But it's a great gig. I teach like 1 class and 3 lessons, and so I only have to be up there kind of 2 or 3 days a week, and then I can come back. So it's gonna be really fun. I'm teaching like doctoral students, which I've been teaching undergrad for a while now. So I'm excited to nerd out.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you go there, but then if you go, let's say, I don't know what days, Monday and Tuesday, you go there and then come back the same day, and then same thing on the next day?
I'll go up like Sunday night and come back Tuesday night.
Okay. Yeah. And they give you like a situation there, a hotel?
I rented a place there. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And how far is it?
It's like 5 hours.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's a commitment.
It's gonna be epic. It's a really cool job, and so I'm very excited about it. And it also just like made more sense for my family. So you kind of had to like balance those two things.
Yeah.
So I'll make it work for the year. Yeah.
No, I mean, the reason I ask is because people watching the show, or if there are people watching the show, I don't know. This is like the real life, of a composer. I feel like this is more the real life of a composer than what you see Philip Glass or John Adams, or name your composer. I mean, I feel like this is more of the story that I hear, like 90+% of the time.
100%.
And the other like, oh, I'm going to just work commission to commission, and that's going to be my life. I don't hear that.
No, I mean, when I was doing my doctorate at Cornell, my wife lived in Philly. We had lived there for like a year or so before I started that degree, and it was definitely, a place that I wanted to be. And also my wife had just gotten this job at the EPA where she just like that's what was her dream job, so like the idea of her leaving that was nonsensical as well. So we did like long distance for 3 years while I was doing my coursework. And every week we would travel. One of us would travel back and forth. When you're starting that, it was kind of like, oh, is this the right choice, or is this like, and it feels like a bold move, I think. And then like as soon as I got to Cornell, it was like, oh, you're doing long distance, you're traveling back and forth here, just like, I feel like, being in music, nothing just happens in your local town all the time. It's like part of it is like just getting used to the travel, kind of embracing it, I think.
I mean, that was the same thing with me too, because like my wife, she was at Princeton, and I was off doing whatever the hell I was doing. I was going from residency to residency to residency.
Yeah.
I wasn't really working. I wasn't really making money, but I felt like that's what I had to do at that time.
Yeah.
So that's what you had to do. You had to do your coursework, and you had to finish up the degree.
Yep.
So after you got the degree, you at Cornell, was the whole point of going to Philadelphia to find that job that would match with where your wife is? Is that how you ended up at the University of the Arts? Or was
it worked out.
Now, quick pit stop to let you know that I do offer one-on-one consultations and lessons in regards to anything composition related. This can range for helping you put together your portfolio for any composition degree that you're applying to, or you might want to improve your creative chops as a composer from week to week or month to month. Or you might want to get a better handle of the behind the scenes of what it's like to be a composer. How do you sell your sheet music? How do you negotiate commission rates? How do you apply to contests? How do you apply to grants? how do you do anything as a composer, let alone just writing the music? So if this is you, you can contact me using the link down in the description below.
I got the gig there actually right before I started at Cornell and University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and then I kind of like left because I had to do TA, teaching assistant work at Cornell. So it was like, I can't do both of these things. It's a little too hectic. So they kind of like left an open door for me when I finished my coursework to come back and do that. And so I kind of had just been writing that and, commissions and stuff for, several years. So it worked out great that I could be in Philly, and, I love Philly very much. It's where, like I said, my family is from. So it worked out that I could spend, several years sticking around there.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of commissions, I don't know if this was a specific commission. I think it was this piece called Vinyl. Mm-hmm. Right? Was that a commission for Alarmal Sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear a couple minutes of that. Let's start with that.
Yeah, great.
Cool. Talking about this tune, because this is an orchestral tune. I remember, I don't know if this is the first time that we met. I think it is, but I'm not sure. Is it the first time when we were doing the Minnesota Orchestra gig together? I think that might have been the first time or second time that we met.
Yeah.
We might have met before at Princeton, maybe. That might be a possibility.
Yeah, I feel like we had some Venn diagram of
yeah,
I don't remember actually the first time.
Yeah, I remember that time period between like 2016, 2015, and like 2018, 19.
Yeah.
There was like a lot of intense activity that me and you were overlapping in. Yeah. I remember you would win this and I would win it the next year. I would win something and you would win it the next year. We would win it at the same time. There was like this frenzy of stuff. And then, that happens when you're in your late 20s, and then you get into your 30s and you want to settle down. You age out of the competition.
That's right.
You're trying to get a real job. And I can't remember what that piece was. It wasn't this piece though. It was another piece.
The Minnesota Orchestra thing was Mosaic, which is another one. Yeah, so that was a full orchestra thing. The Alarmal Sound is like a sinfonietta plus two. It's like a 16-player orchestra. But Alarmal Sound is like, they're just an absolutely incredible ensemble. I remember like feeling like when I was like starting to write that piece, you feel like a little pressure when you're writing for like a great group to like nail it, like just actually we were talking about Nadia Sirota earlier. she was still in a normal sound when I wrote this piece, and I had been listening to her podcast, Meet the Composer, and just was like, I just thought she was like a really cool person, and I just really wanted to write her a gnarly viola solo. So this piece has like this, big epic, like goes from the very bottom of the viola all the way to like the screaming top of it. You felt like there's all these great players. You want to like take advantage of that. So I spent a lot of time on this piece and trying to get it so that it could like really showcase, a lot of the musicianship in that ensemble.
And so the excerpt that I played just now, it's actually right after that solo viola cadenza where you get like this humongous, massive sound.
Yeah.
That starts with like, I think the tempo text there, it said, 33 RPM or to 45. What did I write here? 33 RPM to 45 RPM. I'm like, okay, some shit's about to go down, with this, this marking here. And it did. It didn't disappoint. So that's the part that I played.
Yeah.
For me, when I really like something that I hear and can't figure it out how it's done, like for whatever reason, to me that combination is what excites me a lot. And that's what this part of the piece especially did to me. So I was like wondering, like, since you're here, I'm like, you don't have to get too nitty gritty into it, but I'm just wondering like how did you come up with this part here at the very end of the piece? And with these things if you're looking at the score, it says up 6%, down 6%, these kind of markings.
Yeah.
And you look at it, you're like, what am I looking at here? Because it sounds awesome.
Yeah. No, I can totally nerd out about this. So the idea for the piece, final, is like everything in this piece is all about trying to take the flaws of the medium of vinyl records and sort of bring that to the fore, make it the content of the piece itself. So there's all these like string solos that are kind of like what I imagine as like this is the material that's on the record, and then the piece like quickly turns off of that and like then becomes like a scratch or a skip becomes the content itself. So when we get to the section that you played, this is a shift between a 33 RPM record and a 45 RPM record. If you have a record player, sometimes it's like a notch. It can be a 33 speed or a 45 speed, but some of them you have like actually you can glide between those two. And so the 6% is like basically how much change has to happen to go up by a half step. And so that would speed up the sort of the tempo of the piece, but it would also change the pitch. So that moment in the material is like slowly drifts its way up from 33 speed to 45 RPM speed, which is actually about a perfect fifth. So it has this long drift up, chromatically up a perfect fifth, and then I snap it back down to 33 RPM at the end of that. So it kind of has this like 5-1 cadential thing that sort of happens at the end of it. But the drift is all this like, this is sort of like a thing a sound I've always been obsessed with. In high school band, we used to do this exercise where we would all play a major chord, and whoever was on the third would drop by a half step first, and then the person who was on the fifth would drop by a half step. So it becomes a minor chord, then a diminished chord, and then the root would drop, and so it like finds a major chord again. And so I like always loved that exercise, and so this piece, basically the drift that happens in the music is that, but with the sharp 9 chord. The sharp 9 drifts into a major 9.
If you have a sharp 9 chord, what's the
sorry. It's actually not a dominant 7. Just to clarify, it's a major chord with a sharp 9
added. Okay, just clarifying.
Yeah.
For
all the nerds out there,
for all the sticklers. Or I didn't hear a 7 in that.
Yeah. And yeah, so I liked how I could like play on that old idea, and it helped me sort of like all these different voices are drifting between these different, vinyl speeds.
I mean, for me, because I study with Georg Friedrich Haas, and I don't know how much contact you had with that music, but hearing this kind of music, like because you got to hear the first 5-6 minutes of the piece, I feel like, because it sets up a completely different context when you hear this excerpt, because if I just heard this excerpt in the very beginning, I'm like, oh, it sounds like Haas, because he does kind of the same drifting thing. But when you put it in this context, after all the other material that you did before, it sounds so completely fresh. It doesn't sound like that kind of music anymore. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to mimic something else, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
With Haas, it's like he's got this whole like temporal landscape euphoria thing he's trying to do, but yours is not that way at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you bring him up, because he was actually the mentor composer for Mizzou Festival, which is where this piece was premiered. So he actually is so funny. We were doing the sort of a pre-concert talk, and we're like talking to an audience of laymen, people who sometimes know a lot about music, sometimes know absolutely nothing, and they're just there to experience it. And he asked me this like really nerdy question about like, what I was like trying to do, because it was like very much in his wheelhouse of like, this is, you're setting up these chords that are drifting, and think, how does that relate to tonality and stuff. And I just like had to like completely kind of pivot to make this like make sense to the sort of a lay audience. But my hope is that that music is impactful without all the nerdy stuff we just talked about. Yeah, just trying to focus on the concept of like this pitch warping. That's such a cool feature, and a familiar feature, I think, for a lot of people, a lot of music lovers, about that medium.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to get into it when you're thinking about it that way. I mean, and for me, I sort of wish in a way I didn't have all that other knowledge, because it's kind of like baggage. It's like when I hear it, I'm like, the Haas thing starts turning on my brain, and then I lose what's he doing with the vinyl records, because I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah.
But people that are into music, that collect music and things like that, they know that stuff. But me, since I'm younger, I don't know anything about the vinyl records, so that's why to me I don't have that connection that I do with the Haas repertoire. So it's kind of, for me, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. I want to know what are the chords you're using, and how is it drifting exactly. And that kind of thing. And I also think it's very fresh too, that has nothing really to do with just intonation. Even though you use microtones and stuff, it's not in that spectral kind of way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I some of the chords in that piece at the very end of it, a few places I do kind of write overtone chords, but I don't tune them microtonally to just intonation. Yeah.
You're not like trying to listen in on that. It's not the point.
Piece. Right. I think overtone chords are just, to me, they're just powerful, right? It's so resonant with itself. Anytime you reinforce the overtones, it's going to have extra, I think, power and presence to me. So that was more the goal than referencing, spectralism.
No, it's super powerful, and I think that last part, I think at the very end of the excerpt, there's a new tempo text that is artifacts and distortion. Is that the part where it resolves to the one chord there? Okay. Because that's where end of the excerpt. So, okay, that's meaty right there.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it feels like a final resolution.
Yeah. I think in that case, just like sometimes it happens, particularly with really, I notice it anyway, personally, like when you have really loud records, especially old records, it just like, some things, you get these, like in a, like the term like a wolf tone from a cello, where you get like these things that just like really, like this pitch really pops. That is kind of how I feel about sometimes with these old records. You get these frequencies that just like explode, I wanted to make sure that happened at the climax of this piece. So like I like write like 4 Fs for the French horn, like write massive and brassy, like make sure there's no chance for them not to like make this completely overwhelming. So yeah, that was the goal there.
I mean, it's interesting too, because it's for Sinfonietta, but I don't know, for whatever reason, your Mosaic piece, it didn't have that kind of, the piece with the Minnesota Orchestra. I don't remember a moment like that where everything it felt like a huge orchestra. Or am I being completely, maybe I don't remember it as well.
Yeah, I mean, so that piece like goes through, it's kind of a similar formal structure in that like it's more active and maybe energetic in the first half of it, and then it's like slows down. So it kind of becomes like, it's more of like a chorale at the end of Mosaic. So it's sort of more broadening as opposed to like the aggressive distortion.
Yeah, I mean, without getting, I guess, too into that piece, because we're not going to play that one. But I guess my other question is, because I've also worked with Sinfonietta, and I have pieces for sinfonietta and I have pieces for orchestra. Was there like, and we both did the Minnesota Orchestra thing. They have this reading that they do every year where they have like 6-7 pieces that get picked, and then the Minnesota Orchestra plays them throughout the week. And Kevin Putz was our mentor at the time. I don't know if he's still doing it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but was there a difference to you rehearsing this piece for Alarmo Sound? I never worked with Alarmo Sound before, but rehearsing like a piece like Mosaic with the Minnesota Orchestra, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alarmo Sound is like a new music ensemble, and the Minnesota Orchestra is like, you know, they play more standard romantic and classical repertoire. So you get very different takes on ideas, for sure. Like, orchestra musicians are really good at like drawing out musicality in, you know, lines that would be more familiar to their repertoire. So if I, for example, with Mosaic, which is the piece that they played in Minnesota, when I had the chorale stuff, it was like, great, you know, like this is like super familiar to them. If I had a piece like Vinyl where some in the opening sections of that material, it's like, I need you to be like snarling. This is a record skip. It has to, like, you know, there's a rake across the vibraphones with the back ends of 4 wooden mallets to get this big kind of effect. You know, that's not in a lot of romantic repertoire. So you get Alarmo Sound is much more familiar with trying to get some of those, I think, colors of aggression, and I don't know, I think there's just different fortes for those different groups. But sinfonietta stuff, I think it's smaller. The smaller ensemble means I feel like my interest was kind of focusing on individual players a bit more than you do in the orchestra. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you have like, talk about Mahler symphonies or something, and it's like, oh, you have like these moments where there's like 1 or 3 players playing at a time, and then you get the big orchestra. That works on the scale of like 30, 40, 50, 60, or 90-minute pieces if you're talking about Mahler. Yeah. But when you have an orchestra it's a 8-minute piece, you know, going down to 3 players is like, it can pull out a lot of the energy if you do that for too long. So for me, with writing shorter orchestra pieces, I feel like if I'm writing for full orchestra, I want to like really take advantage of the forces on the stage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I kind of have the opposite view completely.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting, yeah. I mean, I agreed with everything you said, actually, up to the last point. But it makes sense. I mean, I get why people do that. But my feeling, maybe I misunderstood what you said, but my feeling is that with an orchestra, I like the contrast between everybody playing and then like a soloist. Or what I like to do a lot is like start from one and then get to many. And do it in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it happens in your.
Yeah, I'm doing it again. It's right.
Yeah.
I just love it. I just like the idea of, especially the strings. I love the idea of everybody getting to have their own part, which makes the Sibelius file a mess. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It runs really slow, but and makes parts living hell. But
right.
I just like it. I just like the sound that I get out of it. And I like what you're saying with the sinfonietta, that idea of giving individuality. Like, I miss that when I go to an orchestra concert. Sure, I wish that I know what I know that the second, in the second violin section, that person that's playing, 5th desk inside player, I know that person is a great player, maybe the best in their class at whatever conservatory they went to. Mm-hmm. But now they've been in this orchestra. They're getting paid well and all that stuff, and they're raising a family and et cetera, but they don't get that opportunity to show off. Yeah. So for me, that's what I strive to do a little bit. But then sometimes they get upset when I do that too. It's like, wait, I want to blend. They get used to the blending, and they get used to playing in that way. So I think it's important for us as composers to write both. The sinfonietta stuff, chamber stuff, and the orchestra stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm also agreeing with you too, though. I mean, I think it's more to me about, I was thinking sort of specifically about the 2 pieces of mine we've been talking about, where there are definitely solo moments for me in Mosaic in the larger orchestra piece, but I feel like okay, you get a little taste of this, so you can know like that we're focusing on really small details, but also then quickly expanding into a much larger ensemble. And I think, I hear that in your pieces too, where you have that sort of like different levels of focus where you can zoom in on something. Focus on individuality versus the whole is very important in large orchestra stuff too. It's just about, I think in a shorter piece, I kind of think about doing that more quickly, like getting that focus and then pulling out to see the full ensemble. Whereas like a sinfonietta thing, I feel like you have much more flexibility to focus on smaller details, just for longer, just because there's less happening on stage.
Yeah, I mean, and I also miss that idea of when you're playing a sinfonietta, especially new music sinfonietta, they're very open to playing really whatever you want.
Oh, yeah.
And I do miss that aspect in an orchestra, because like I really hate like having to explain like, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. Like if you see like an Andrew Norman score, like play or sustain or any of these things, he's got like a block of text like that big right over like every other system, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I just wish like he has to do that, because but if you put that for alarmal sound, I think you can. I honestly think you can put a note head, and they would already know what that is, because they've seen many composers use that same notation for whatever he's describing.
Yeah, I mean, I think like sol ponticello is like one of these like foundational places you learn that. Like if you have sol ponticellos where a string player plays a little closer to the bridge, and it gets this kind of like gnarly metallic kind of sound. And if you give sol ponticello to orchestra that plays romantic repertoire regularly, then they play just a hair closer to the bridge. It gets a little bit metallic. And if you give that same marking to a new music player, it's like they're playing like practically on the bridge. It's like squeaking a lot. It's got this like almost like pseudo distorted guitar kind of effect. So there's just very different ways to approach what us composers put in the score. And so if you've listened to a lot of alarmal sound or Jack Quartet or something, then you might expect a certain response, and when you go to a full orchestra, they don't see it that way. So you kind of have to like know who you're writing for a little bit, I think, and where your audience is going to be.
Or just put like molto sol pont.
Yeah.
Or put sol pont scratchy or sol pont gnarly, or so. Like you got to put some description, otherwise they're not sure what you mean. If you really want me to make the thing is, they don't want to sound bad.
Yeah. Right.
And to them, sounding bad is sounding different than what they're used to playing when they're doing the Mahler.
Yeah, but there are lots of great repertoire that push that aggression. So sometimes just like referencing that helps. Like Strauss, for example, writes this like just massive brass sounds, right? And so sometimes if you write triple forte, they're trying to play with a really big sound, but like a really round, pure, good sound still. And sometimes it's saying like think like Strauss or something like that. When you're in the rehearsal to the players, they're like, oh, okay, got it. And they just like blast it out.
And they know what that means.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little tricks like that to kind of figure out how to get these sound that you want.
I mean, when you're in rehearsal with, so like if you want to sound like that in orchestra, I don't remember the way you interacted with the conductor there at Minnesota, or if you have a story about another orchestra. How is it when you're in rehearsals and you want something specific? Do you talk to the conductor? Do you talk to the musicians?
Yeah, I mean, I think in almost every orchestral circumstance, you want to, leave the conductor to do their work. And then occasionally, it depends on the conductor. Some will like sort of turn around and ask for feedback in the rehearsal. More often, I feel like they come talk to you at the break after a rehearsal and figure out what went well, what you want different. I kind of will often, I think definitely take advantage of the conductor's knowledge, but it can be really useful for like little details to just like at the break, that flute solo didn't go quite how I wanted. Let me go talk to the flute player, It's also nice, not just from like a sound perspective, but it's nice from a composer feeling connected to the ensemble. Like sometimes when you work with an orchestra, there's 100 people on stage, and like the only person you've like personally connected with is the conductor, right? And so I love like going to talk to players, like even if they sound killer on something, it's like, hey, how was that part? Is that lay okay on your instrument? And then like I just feel like you get to know the ensemble, get to know how like they're feeling about playing your piece, if things are going great, if things are like, oh, that part's a little tricky. All that stuff is, I think, great when you're working with an orchestra.
Yeah, I have a funny story about this actually, about the going up to the players, because I'm the same way. I love going up to the players during the break, and not just going up to them when something is going wrong, you know, like when you hear like, oh, can I help with this, or what can we do to make this better? Even just telling people, oh, you sound badass on that, thank you. You know, like totally. That also helps. But I had a mentor, one of these recent orchestral things I did, and she was saying, you know, you don't want to go up to the players during the break. You know, that's their break. And I kind of raised my hand and said, you know what, like I'm guilty of that. I do that all the time. And she was saying, you know, that's not really, you know, the most professional thing to do. And I'm like, well, you know, I've done that basically every rehearsal, and I guess I don't really feel that sorry about it. It's not like I'm talking to every single musician. Yeah. It's just a few that that maybe they're sitting there already playing their lick. You know, they're not in the green room or something taking a break. They're like on stage still working on their part.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I think I understand that being in an orchestra where you practice as much as they do every single week, that they need their pauses, but I've had zero negative interactions. I feel like everyone has been like, oh, I'm so glad, like, just to, you know, connect with the player who's like putting a lot into making my music happen.
Yeah, and it's not like they're interacting with living composers like every day either.
Right.
There's also that aspect to it too. Speaking of, you know, talking to players and being really, you know, being one-on-one and having the interaction, I want to talk a little bit about this next tune over here. Called Splinter for a piano trio, completely different than anything we're talking about here. Let's hear a couple minutes. This one was ran for Copeland, the Copeland Cultivate.
House Ensemble.
What's that all about?
This was Copeland House has this festival called Cultivate every summer. It's like 6 composers go to it. They kind of leave it up to the composer what your exact instrumentation is, but they have a piano trio and a clarinet there, so violoncello, piano, clarinet. And I had just been like, had this idea for a while for piano trio sort of rolling around in the back of my mind. So I decided to write for that. And I was just, when I was writing this, I was really kind of obsessing over bluegrass fiddle techniques. I love watching those videos where someone's like, you know, basically like in first position the whole time, like the most comfortable, easiest position you can be in. And, you know, uses a lot of open strings and just kind of just like some slide inflections, some like simple things like that. And it just sounds like gnarly. I just love it. It's like, they sound so virtuosic, even in like this really simple place. I think because they're taking advantage of the open strings so much, it allows, to me, like a very vibrant sound. Well, sometimes they're very technically difficult passages, but it just, the idea of like you ever heard the term barn burner?
Yeah, barn burner. Yeah, like a virtuoso, like like a Paganini, I don't know, Paganini comes to mind or something like this, a
Yeah.
rock star.
Yeah, it's used a lot in bluegrass. And so I was just like wanting to capture that kind of sound with the violin here.
You know, like this whole talk about first position and stuff like that. I mean, it reminds me of like Arabic music or even Indian raga music, like where, you know, they're like if they're playing on some kind of fiddle, they're also like in first position also the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
They're not moving their hand around that much,
Mm-hmm.
but they're doing a lot of things to make up for the lack of, I would say, like Western technique where they can jump to another position really quickly and things like this. They know how to use vibrato. Like their vibrato is way more varied and complex than Western vibrato. The amount of ornamentation they do and things like that are way more complex. The rhythms are way more complex.
Yeah.
And you do these things with open fits, not just with the open strings, but you're like doing fingered open fits too. It's pretty crazy. I was like looking at the score and I'm like, God damn, that's a lot of like parallel fits. That are not just the open ones. You got them like fingering. Yeah. Right? Open fits that are like
definitely
not open fits, but fits that are laid on the adjacent strings. It's crazy.
It's a Fuchsian nightmare up there. Breaking all the counterpoint rules. Personally, like I'm 100% obsessed with sliding parallel fifths. I use it in many of my pieces. I just love the sound, especially on strings. So with this, the goal was to sort of take some of that idea of like using the open strings and these like sort of low position, sort of fast technique, bluegrass ideas, and like figure out how I can use sort of like new music ideas to like ramp up vitality of that is how I think about it anyway. So it's like it started out with like these like sort of slides where you're starting doing it on one string and then realize that like sliding with fifths off of this just like it just feels like it really unsettles the open string to me a lot. And so I feel like you kind of have these like really feel to me like maybe aggressive or like powerful gestures, but then they always get rooted back in like the stability of the open strings. So
I mean, the other thing too is like when you're playing open string on the violin, like your A and E or G and D or D and A, right? Then you play like a fifth that's fingered. Like you have these like B's and F's, or you have like E's and B's, or things like this. I think where you gotta finger those. You can't just like you can't find an open. There's no open alternative.
Yeah.
Like the sound gets like muted all of a sudden, and then you get back to the open string, but you're still doing these parallel fits. So it's the timbre is changing a lot, even though you're doing like the same kind of sequential thing.
Yeah.
It's like so simple when you look at it on the page, but it sounds very complex. So I thought that was really cool. Have you heard the piece, John Corigliano's Stomp? Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
Oh, you have? You heard it?
Yeah.
That kind of is, I mean, yours is very different, but he takes that G string and tunes it down to an E. Yeah. And does a similar kind of bluegrass.
I heard that only like last year, but it's pretty interesting piece.
So after this, what did you think of does it feel like you can compare like strategies on how you were doing that, or it feels like a completely different thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tuning down, I think it hypes up the timbral difference that you were just talking about, because it's like loose but like fat in a way, you know, that low open string. So I mean, I think a lot of it when I was approaching it is that you take, I don't know, undergrad level orchestration, they tell you don't write fifths for a string player. And so for me, it was like the sliding had a huge part of it, because the reason they tell you not to write is because it's very hard to tune for a string player, because they usually play with one finger, because you can't get two fingers in the same place. So they touch one finger to do it, so that it's hard to actually like, I got to tune the bottom pitch up. I'm sort of like turning my whole finger to get that.
So if you're watching the video here, like we have, like if you have two hands here, right, you got G and D. Right, the G and D string right next to each other. Yeah. If you want to play like A flat and E flat, right? You want to play A flat on the G string, you want to play E flat on the D string at the same time. Yeah. You got to play like this node here and this node here, which are like literally right next to each other. Yeah. You can't like take your two fingers and go like that. Exactly. You got to put like one finger. You could, yeah. A guitar, Guitar players do that all the time, right? Yeah. But a violinist is not used to doing this kind of motion when they're playing like this. they want to put two fingers to get so this is like, they don't want to do that.
They don't want to do it.
I've
yeah.
encountered that so much too when I'm writing. But you figured it out.
I think
somehow.
that to me, the sliding part makes, when I'm doing it, it's like they're sliding through it, or they have like a wide vibrato that I'll request in Splinter a lot. The intonation is sort of irrelevant because it's happening so fast, or you're moving off of it so quickly that you hear the pitches, you hear that it's like these sliding fifths, but you don't have to like nail this like drone tuning of it where it's got to be perfect,
That makes sense, yeah, because this is the issue that I have a lot.
Yeah.
Is that especially when I'm sometimes in orchestra, I write these kind of not open fits, but fingered fits, and I put non-Debussy, and they don't like that at all. They'll play Debussy without even writing Debussy. They'll do it anyway. Say, hey, I see you split in why aren't you doing the double stops? Like, because we don't want to do it. It sounds better if it's. No, I don't want it to sound better. I want it to sound like that. Like I want to have that kind of roughness to it. But they don't want to play. Often they don't want to play rough. But when you got solo players and you have that one-on-one communication.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they expect.
Yeah, it's a particular sound, so I think it's just sort of about trying to guide the player to that as best as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're at this particular festival, it's I think it's in New York, right? Upstate New York.
It's in Westchester area. Yeah.
So you're there, you're composing this piece, then there's other composers composing for the same group, right?
Yeah.
Plus or minus some players. Do they all kind of have a prompt? Like, it's like when you go to a festival like this, is there like a prompt, like you got to write in a certain style, or you got to write this many minutes, or
I think
how does that work?
Yeah, there's most festivals have like a certain minutes restriction, just for the occasional composer who wants to like drop in like with a 30-minute piece, which sometimes happens. So there's like a minute limit, but I think they left it very open, which to me is ideal. Sometimes it's nice to have a prompt to get your ideas rolling, but it was worked out perfectly because like I said, I had this idea in the back of my mind, so this was like the perfect chance to unleash that.
Yeah, I mean that's why I was wondering, because I don't know any other of your pieces that do this kind of Americana bluegrass kind of thing, unless it's
coming in lately. Yeah, I have a piece kindling that's for sextet, like a percussion, Puro plus percussion sextet, and the violin really leans into that. And I'm working on a big piece right now. Like, it's not like the main feature of it, but it kind of has that. Like, I kind of have kind of become a little obsessed with that sound lately. Yeah,
it's hard, like when you do something well, to not like want to keep going in that.
Yeah,
but I feel like a lot of composers, they find something and they're like, oh, I need to restart my language on the next piece. I don't know if you feel that kind of pressure ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some amount of like, you don't want to like repeat yourself, but I find, I don't know, for probably like the past maybe 8 years, I have like different sounds that I keep returning to, and I feel like I'm still finding new stuff to do with them, with those like musical materials. I think there probably maybe becomes a point where you're like, all right, I have like, that well has run dry, but I'm still finding new stuff with that, and I like how I feel like there's some connection between my body of work, which I think is a good thing. So I think a balance is a good thing to shoot for with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running into this issue too lately, where I feel like I'm tired of like, at least to me, coming up with new things all the time. And I'm like trying to figure out, like I literally have scores of mine. You know how some people have scores of Stravinsky, Firebird, or whatever. They put like Debussy, where they put La Mer or whatever on their stand when they're writing an orchestra piece. Like for whatever reason, I put my old pieces. Because I feel like the La Mer is not going to help me here. I need something that I know that I actually did in the past to help me out. That was successful. And so that's what I've been doing. I have these old scores that are up, and I'm like, my God, 2016, 2015, Jesus Christ, like this has been going on for a while. Taking, like literally copying things and say, okay, can I use this in a different way? And that I've never done before. Like I felt like we both have been composing long enough though, even though we're both relatively young. I mean, we've been composing long enough where we can start, theoretically do things like that, which kind of blows my mind, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know,
I have a couple pieces. Oftentimes, like if I'm writing, like if I write a 10-minute piece, very likely I write about like 20 minutes of material for that. Some of it's like, you know, just different variations on what I end up using in the piece that I pulled for X or Y reason. But there's definitely places where like, oh, this material is like very much tied to the piece that I didn't use it, and I'll like start a new piece on that, and it's like, so these two pieces feel like very related because that material originally fit with all this stuff. So it feels like, I don't know, cannibalistic, even though it's like it's new material, you know. Actually, I have another recent piece that I literally copied like 1 or 2 bars that are in another piece, and I felt weird about it, but I was like, it fits here too, you know. I don't know. I'm not sure how. I'm still assessing how I feel about it. Yeah,
I feel super weird about it too. I mean, I'm doing it right now at the piece I'm writing now. Yeah. I mean, I literally copied the last 8 bars of my octet. It was like kind of like a sinfonietta for ICE, for International Contemporary Ensemble, which is kind of like I feel like almost like a sister organization for whatever reason to Alarm Will Sound. Like in my mind, I think Alarm Will Sound, I think of ICE, you know. Yeah. And I literally just copied that last 8 bars because I was so happy with how it went. I'm like, how can I turn this into an orchestra piece? Yeah. And it was kind of weird in the beginning to like literally do that, like, and not do it by accident, because sometimes that happens by accident because you're gonna. Yeah. But like to do it like on purpose. Yeah. And then feel that it eventually feels right. I'm like, this is a new experience for me. Yeah. You know.
I mean, the context totally changes it. So I feel like justified in doing it, but it is, it's a weird.
It feels a little dirty.
It feels dirty, yeah. Yeah.
I wanna move on to something else. I think this is an older piece, right? Because I've definitely heard this piece before, called Rift and Shade. Yeah. For string quartet. There's another new music ensemble too. For whatever reason, I think Alarmal Ice. I think Alarmal. Did I say Alarmal Ice?
Alarmal Ice.
I did say that right. Alarmal Sound, Ice. And usually the third ensemble after that, I say, is Jack Quartet. Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, those are the 3. There are a lot more, but like when I think of the ones that come to my head first, for whatever reason, those are the 3. So let's hear a couple of minutes of this. Yeah. This one, I don't know, for whatever reason, you can shoot me if you want. It reminded me of the Debussy string quartet, but your version of it.
Oh yeah,
the pizzicato thing.
Yeah, Debussy, or I think Ravel too. Like I feel like the music is very different, but when I started composing, I mean, I wrote a lot when I was younger, but in college was when I sort of properly decided I was going to become a composer. I had an album that was Ravel in F and Debussy in G, and I wore that thing out because I was writing like my very first string quartet. And so I still love those pieces. All the new music stuff I've heard, still love those pieces. And so there's definitely gestures that, I think I'm really attracted to in that it's like this sound just sounds really vibrant here in Ravel, or like, the pizzicato stuff is just like, just incredible energy to me. And so this is sort of like my first maybe like big boy string quartet. And so I wanted to sort of like play, like how can I take these sounds that are, it kind of really drew me to composition early on and bring my modern sensibilities to it.
Would you say like this, because this piece is like from 2016, right? Mm-hmm. Or is it even earlier than that?
Yeah, 2016.
Is this like probably the piece that you would say like kind of started like the stuff you're working on now, or were there pieces before?
100%.
Yeah.
I feel like this is sort of a piece that feels like it started like my career and my current style.
Wow.
I feel like, I'm sure you like went through this too. Like you have that one piece that you like win some competitions with, and you're like, oh, okay, like I can maybe do this, and this was that piece for me. And so, when I like do presentations, still I'll often talk a little bit about this piece, because it feels like a lot of my music is developing off of ideas from that. Vinyl, for example, like the pitch sliding stuff that we were talking about earlier, that the second movement of this piece, Rift and Shade, the Shade movement, has this pitch sliding. And so like that, I first stumbled on that like on a keyboard, and I had a pitch mod wheel, and I was just like, oh my God, I could listen to this for 20 minutes. just literally playing a chord and sliding it. And I don't know why, I was just so obsessed with that sound, but that plays into like the sliding fifths we were talking about earlier. It's really been a big influence on me. So
yeah, and you did have sliding fifths too in the very last part.
Yep.
And that reminded me too, because I heard vinyl, I think, after I heard this. Yeah, because I've heard this piece a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that is from that piece.
Mm-hmm,
but like you were saying before, it's a completely different context.
Yeah.
It does not mean you're copying yourself. It's literally something different.
Yeah. I think yeah, it's kind of like realizing when I found these sounds that give me that experience where it's like I just play this as I'm writing the piece, and I just like want to live in that space for a long time. That to me is like, okay, there's a lot to mine here, and so like you do your best to mine it for the piece you're working on, but really when I get obsessed with something like that, it's like, okay, I can do a lot with this material. And so I try to think about other angles I can approach that idea for different pieces.
Yeah, I mean, like all that rhythmic element in the riffs movement. I mean, we hear it in the Bluegrass, in the Splinter piece.
Yep.
I mean, you hear it there, but it's a completely different context.
Yep.
And you hear it in the beginning of vinyl also a little bit too, the rhythmic language you're using too. So it's there, but like, unless you pointed it out, you don't really notice. Right. I mean, now I'm noticing it because we're talking about it, but we're just a couple of nerds. To 99% of people, it doesn't really matter. So.
Yeah, right.
I wanted to go back to something you said about, because I also experienced this too, that, you wrote this piece, Rifts and Shades, and you won some competitions with it, and then you realize, oh, maybe I'm getting somewhere here. Mm-hmm. And I also had the same experience too, winning a bunch of competitions with a couple pieces from actually the similar time period, 2015,
Right.
2016. I have to ask, because I also have a kind of answer to this too. Is there, when you win a competition or you win many competitions for a single piece, is that what drives you to keep going in that direction, or is it something else? Maybe you wrote the piece and you felt it before you even won something, or is it something in between?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I mean, yeah, like definitely feeling like when I finished that piece, I felt like just like it did everything that I was trying to wanted to hear. I felt like, which I think is like, to me, I've always like described it to my students as like, this is like a rite of passage. I feel like that you get as a composer. Like you spend so much time, like you have mentor composers, you have your teachers, and you're like, you bring in your stuff, you want to know what they think. And at some point you arrive at this place where it's like, that was everything I wanted to do. And you could go to concerts or submit it to competitions and do really well or really terribly, like, people hate the piece or you don't win anything or something like that. And the fact that it like did everything you wanted it to do is just like, it's all you wanted to happen. So like the idea that if I took that rift and shade to a lesson and someone was like, oh, I don't like this, or you should change this, I'd be like, nah, that's exactly what I wanted, which is, to me, it was like a really kind of empowering thing as a composer to just feel like that was exactly what I wanted to do. And so I'm definitely sort of like a maybe tedious composer. I like really spend a lot of time trying to get everything to feel like that to me. Doesn't always happen, but I feel like when I feel that way and I send a piece out, it's just like really gratifying to just know that I can feel confident in what I tried to do was accomplished on the score, at least.
Yeah, so like that kind of gratification, that kind of knowing, the knowing part probably happens when you finish the piece. It doesn't even happen when you give it to the performers.
Yeah.
It happens like when you finish.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, certainly sometimes like, you send a piece to performers and you hear it live and you're like, wow, that was, I thought that was okay, but that turned out really good or something. But yeah, I definitely feel that way in the score. But it's like, to answer your question though, like winning the competitions is really just like, feels like it affirms how you felt about the piece. And it also gives you more chances for commissions and to write new pieces and everything. So when I feel that way about a piece, I definitely try to make sure I submit it to stuff,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel the same way. When I know if the piece is good when I finish it, like regardless of showing it to anyone. Well, I show it to my wife. That's
yeah.
She's a hard critic. Let me tell you, Jesus Christ. But when she doesn't say anything, that's when I know it's good. She's like, yeah, that's good. Or she doesn't even say it's good. It's like, oh yeah, that works.
Yeah,
I say that works.
That works.
And now I say that to my students. That works. They know that means I like it if I say that works.
That's
because
right.
It doesn't really matter if I like the tune, right? It matters if you like the tune. It doesn't really matter if somebody else likes it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, it matters if you feel satisfied with it.
So my wife is a scientist, also not a musician, and I feel like you get a lot of information from their feedback. I think as composers, like we're very much sort of trained to like take your aesthetic interest out of the listening experience. Like, not to say that I don't like listen to stuff and think I enjoy this or I love this, but like my brain is like sort of wired now to like assess how the composer is going through their ideas, what they're doing with the material, all these like little nitty gritty composition things, and I don't always think about like how it makes me feel. And I remember listening to like some gnarly new music thing, I forget what it was, and my wife walks into the room, she's like, that's kind of creepy. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, it is, you're right. I didn't even like register that.
Yeah, it's not even something that you were even thinking about.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, I'm the same way.
So I think, everything that I write for myself, I put my aesthetics onto it, obviously. But it's useful, I think, to separate a little bit because you can get so many cool ideas from, beautiful, ugly, gnarly, scary stuff like that in the right context. To go back to context, like it depends on how you use the idea. So listening widely is definitely, I think, a big focus of like my teaching and just my composing too.
I mean, speaking of listening widely, you guys all listen widely to his stuff. Charles Peck, got it down in the description below. And I appreciate you coming. It's a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Going formal, I don't know why.
Going super formal. That's fine. Go however you want. All right, and there you have it. Cool.